Back tonight on In Focus. Trade Union Federation Cosatu has called on the government to extend the fuel levy holiday. The subsidy has been helping motorists cope with the ever-increasing fuel prices over the last few months. Petrol prices will nudge the 26 Rand mark at midnight, along with an added 75 cents as government trims its fuel levy subsidy of 150 Rand. Joining us now to elaborate on Cosatu's call is its Parliamentary coordinator, Mathew. Mathew, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. Well, one would say maybe the horse has already bolted, so to speak, because those prices are kicking in at midnight. You're still calling for it. Is it not too late in your view?
It is late. We had really hoped government would have extended some relief, as they had promised they would do. We had hoped government would come with a new more affordable fuel price regime, as the Ministers of Finance and Mineral and Energy Resources had committed to doing so. But look, nonetheless, we have to do something. This is not the last fuel price increase. You remember that they're phasing out the tax relief that was given over the past few months. So 75 cents this month, and the next month the other 75 cents would also come aboard. We also see the Rand-dollar exchange rate is at a terrible low of nearly 17 to a dollar. So that's also going to hit us hard, and we expect the Ukraine conflict to continue for some time. So we need to do something. But I think the point is, workers, the economy, businesses simply cannot afford the fuel price regime as it is currently. Over 26 Rand a litre. It's very possible by Christmas it could be nudging towards 30 Rand a litre. So something must be done. And the fact is that a third of the fuel price regime is government taxes and the road accident fund levy. So that's within government's control. They can do something about it. They can decrease it. And that's immediate relief they can give to workers, to consumers, to commuters, to the economy. And they need to do something about it. It's simply not affordable for an economy that's in a deepest recession living memory. We have an unemployment rate of 45%. We're still emerging from COVID-19. We're battling electricity load shedding. As you can see, I'm sitting in the dark at home. And then government just says, well, there's nothing we can do with the fuel price regime. They can do something about it. They can reduce the taxes. They can fix the road accident fund, which has been in a crisis for many, many years. It's got liabilities of about 400 billion Rand. They can retable the two bills at Parliament, which are going to overhaul and fix the road accident fund. They also need to make sure that we fix public transport. So let's get all of our metro rail lines fully operational again, because that helps to provide alternative transport for 10 million commuters in our cities. Let's give more support to buses and in particular to taxis, who currently give no support from government, because that's going to help remove people from private cars into public transport. But we need to do something. We simply cannot continue as is, because that's really just sending the economy into a deeper recession, which we simply cannot afford.
Now, the opposition then, Mathew, has submitted its fuel price deregulation bill to Parliament for processing. It was suggested previously by Treasury in a policy document, this proposal of bringing in more competition as a way of reducing the price. Do you think it will help? Would you support a call of that nature?
Look, I think we need to welcome any idea which is going to help reduce the fuel price regime. So whatever the idea comes from, let's have the discussion. We think there is a space for some competition. We're not sure if that's going to resolve it, because currently the diesel price is to an extent deregulated. So you do find some variation in diesel prices between petrol stations. But right now, diesel is currently a little bit more expensive than petrol. So we're not sure that's the sum total. Yeah. But what we do know is that the tax regime, about 32% of the fuel price goes to taxes. That can be reduced. Of course, the question will be then, so where will you fill the hole in the government fiscus if you reduce the tax on the fuel price? We think that's actually a fairly simple solution. Give more money to the South African Revenue Service, because SARS has been shown to be extremely efficient. It's been rebuilt, and it's been shown that if you give SARS R1 billion, they can generate far more than that, up to 10 billion Rand in additional tax revenues. So I think that's the way to go. We need to give relief to workers and to commuters in the economy, reduce the fuel taxes, let's fix public transport, and let's plug the hole by giving more support to SARS and the fiscus. The longer-term issue, though, Tabo, also is that we've been in this crisis, not to the same extent, but in a similar crisis about 20 years ago when the U.S. invaded Iraq. We also saw that time the Rand plummeting against the dollar, and the international oil price also hitting $120 a barrel. So there's always going to be a crisis around the world, in the Middle East or wherever it is.
Yeah.
So we do need to urgently begin to move our vehicles, be it cars or buses or trains, motorbikes, etc., from fuel to electric. Of course, when you're having load shedding, that sounds like a fanciful dream.
Yes.
But in the long term, over the next decade, we do need to begin to do that because this is a critical way of insulating us from a perpetually volatile international oil price.
So, I mean, it's been argued that we have been, as you mentioned here before, at 120 or even over $120 per barrel, but the rand was a little bit stronger at that time, so we didn't feel the impact as much as we are doing. So, I mean, to make the point, to say, well, let's fix all the other things as well that are not going right, energy being one of them, but also continued strikes, particularly when it refers to labor, bringing the confidence of investors a little bit low when it comes to South Africa. And these are all the things that are contributing to a weaker rand, and therefore we feel the impact of the price of crude oil sitting at $120 US. What do you say?
Well, look, on the issue of strikes, if you take the stats from the Department of Labor, so a neutral record of stats, our strikes are actually at the lowest in a decade. It's not often we have strikes. Look, workers never go on a strike as a port of first choice because the rule of no work, no pay is applied. So when a worker, be it a mine worker or wherever they work, goes on strike, it's a heavy consequence to that worker. But workers go on strike because they're frustrated when management refuses to address their grievances, be it not getting wage increases to protect them from inflation, or other issues at the workplace. So it's a tool for workers to express their frustrations. If we want to avoid strikes, so the tool is then for management to engage with workers timelessly, to address the issues, and to engage meaningfully so you don't force a worker to go on strike. Workers don't go on strike because they want to, it's because they're frustrated and they feel they're not being heard. But look, on a positive note, we've seen today that the unions at Eskom have signed the wage agreement. That's a positive resolution to the issue. We've seen workers' unions resolve the Sibanye issue. And we are in the midst of the wage negotiation season right now, but I think in many fronts, unions are working proactively to address workers' issues, to make sure management addresses them, and to see how can they be resolved. But workers equally are frustrated. They've seen the wages being eroded by inflation. They've seen the wages being eroded by above inflation electricity, municipal tariff hikes. Workers who have jobs are lucky, but they're supporting relatives who lost their jobs in the past 2 years. Workers are highly indebted. Even public servants are really struggling to survive. And at the same time, they see politicians have mismanaged the economy. They see the private sector not investing fully to grow the economy. Yeah. They see politicians have broken our key parastatals like Eskom, Transnet, Metrorail, and so forth, or municipalities. So really workers have been the ones carrying the economy on their shoulders, but they're not reaping the benefits, and they're actually paying the consequence for political and economic mismanagement. We also figure that in most of these companies, it's workers' pension funds which are invested, which keep these companies afloat. Yet often workers don't receive the benefits. But I think, Thabo, to answer your questions of what needs to be done, well, we need to fix Eskom because electricity is critical for every company to work, to sell their products, to make income. We need to fix Transnet because that's critical to the mining, to manufacturing, to agricultural sector and jobs. We need to fix Metrorail because that's critical to public transport in the cities. We do need to fix local government because we've seen many municipalities disintegrate, and as a consequence, we've seen companies close shop, like we saw with Clover in Lichtenburg and Frankfurt. We need to see some people go into prison for corruption because investors, be it domestic or foreign, need to have a sense that when they invest in South Africa, the money will not be stolen. Yeah. So I think for us, those are the fundamental issues we need to resolve. Yeah. If you can deal with those issues, the economy will recover. We will see jobs being created. And of course, we do need to see some sort of social relief being given to the poor, like the SOD grant. We need to see other measures given to stimulate the economy. But I think for us, if we tackle these fundamental obstacles, South Africa can get back on track, and we can see things turn around quite quickly.
Yeah. Some consumers are saying, well, Cosatu, put extra pressure then on your partners to fix these things and stop squabbling amongst themselves on who gets to be the minister in charge of Eskom or something of that nature, but actually get things going and get things fixed.
Well, look, that's exactly, we agree with that sentiment. That's exactly what we've been doing. It was Cosatu which drafted the Eskom Social Compact, which said, let's look at giving debt relief to Eskom. Let's look at getting it back on its feet because it is our most critical national economic asset. We spent countless hours over the past 2 years in NEDLAC helping government to release, working with colleagues in business to release 64 billion rand from the Unemployment Insurance Fund, which went out to help 5.5 million workers in the private sector who had lost wages. We worked closely with government and business and elected draft the Economic Recovery Plan. We've also worked closely with the Department of Health, with employers to help roll out the vaccine program, because that is a critical tool to saving lives and to saving livelihoods. So I think for us, we agree with that sentiment. We cannot simply pontificate. We have to look at solutions. We have to look at practical implementation, and that's what our unions have been doing across the board. So in the midst of the COVID pandemic, in the clothing sector, for example, Sector Clothing Workers Union worked flat out to make sure the UF was dispersed to workers, to make sure the workers were engaged on the vaccine, roll out the vaccines, because all of these things are critical to saving our jobs and to saving our lives. We cannot simply expect government to do it. It doesn't have the sufficient resources or power. Equally, we cannot expect business on its own to be able to do it. That's why we're also having engagements currently with the presidency at NEDLAC on a social compact, because I think for us, we are in the same boat together as a country, be it government, business, or labor. We need to resolve our issues together, and it requires all of us to make contributions and make compromise at times. But it has to be based upon progressive principles of protecting the poor, protecting workers, and making sure we deal with the fundamental obstacles to economic growth.
Mathew Parks, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on and your intervention tonight. Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator there, Mathew Parks. They are, of course, continuing to call for government to reconsider and come up with alternative ways to certainly save already strained consumer under pressure due to the rise in fuel costs.